Hey there, IT 140 students. So in this recording, we're going to talk about files in Python. So let's kind of jump down here. So the idea of what we're going to do here is that we're going to work with a simple text file. So I'm going to open up Notepad++. You can open up Notepad or Text Wrangler or any simple text. And so I've got lines of text in here, line 1, line 2, this is a line, and so forth. So a text file is just a simple file, doesn't contain any kind of formatting. So when I save this, so I save it as a normal text file, txt, so I'm gonna put it on the desktop. And so again, we've got just a simple text file that can be opened just like this. So we're working with really simple files here, okay? Now, the idea of working with files is really simple. We're going to open the file, do something with the file, and then close the file. Doesn't matter if it's Python, Java, C++, this process is the exact same. And in Python, they make it pretty easy to work with files, where we have an open function where we just give it the name of the file. So this is going to open up a file called myfile.txt. We can then read the file, so they just called it F, that's a file reader. So we do read, that reads in the entire text of the file as a string, and then we close out the file. Always make sure that you close it, otherwise somebody else might not be able to open it later on. And then here you can see that they saved off the contents to a variable, and they're just printing that out. So let's just go ahead and copy and paste this code in here. And here is the contents of myfile.txt. And so I can right-click my project, add new file. We'll call this myfile.txt. And here's the lines that are in there. So if we run this, so we can see that eventually the contents of myfile.txt are printing out that variable. So it's read in right here. It's exactly what's in that file. Now, one thing I want you to see here is that it is written out as 2 lines because this is 2 lines. I'm going to put a breakpoint in here, and I'm going to click debug. And so when I look at the variable contents right here, contents, you can see right there, it's got the new line character. So that read method reads in the entire contents and it puts in new line characters. So if you wouldn't want to have new line characters, then you'd have to do something different. In this case, if I don't want that new line character, I just need to make sure everything is on the same line. And let me back up. Oh, by the way, this makes sure that this file, when I just reference it by name, has to be in the same directory as the main.py file. So if I right click, open in Explorer, I can see that that file that I just created right there is in the same directory as the project. So that's the way files always work. They're in the same directory. If I wanted to, I could give it a path to the file, but I don't want you to do that because then that is specific to your machine. In fact, they do something like that right here. That's specific to your machine, and I don't have that, so just make sure it's in the same project file, project directory as your project. All right, so this example reads in all of the text at once. Typically, what you're going to want to do is read the lines of the text and then get a list back of those strings. So they have an example here. So I'm going to copy the data right here. And I'm just going to paste that in there. And I'll add in 19 and 37. And so I've got those numbers right there. So this time we're going to read in the contents of the file and we're going to do something with them. So instead of my data.txt, it's going to be my file.txt since I'm just reusing that same file. So this read lines method is going to save the data to a list. So then I have a list of the numbers and we want to eventually calculate an average. So I can loop through my list of lines. They have an int function call here because everything read in is always a string. So they're going to accumulate the total and then we can calculate the average. So I'm going to put a breakpoint there so we can see what lines contains as it's read in. So lines right there, you can see the 105, 65, 78, 19, 37. So those are the values that we read in, but it also treats them as a string. Okay, so it treats it as a string wrapped in quotations, and it's got the new line character there. So I can't work with those as a number until I perform the int operation on them. So int line 105, now it's going to have a total of 105. So this is going to accumulate the total, and then I'm just going to continue out. So my total has been accumulated. It's 170, and there were 5 values. So that's going to calculate. Oops, I thought I hit the right button. Oops, there we go. So my total is actually 304, and I think there's 5 of them, so that should be a 60.8 average. And sure enough, we have it all calculated out for us. Fantastic. So this is kind of the typical process that you're going to be using. So a text file, when you're reading it in programming purposes, you kind of have an idea of what it contains and have a semblance of the fact that it's going to contain all values that are the same type. So you can assume in the code that you can read it in and then treat them as, in this case, some kind of number, okay? Section 2 here, they're going to talk about writing to files. So instead of using a instead of using read, we're going to use a write operation. And same process, we're going to open up our file. We're going to write to it. We're going to close it. And oh, by the way, when I open this file to write to it, if it doesn't exist, then it will be created. If it does exist, this W right here is going to override whatever was in the file before. So this will open up our file. We're going to write some text to it, and then we're going to close it out. Again, always open it, do something, and then close it. So let's comment this out for a second. Let's paste this in. So I'm going to call this myfile2.txt. And so I'm going to run it, created the file, and it's got the text that it contained. So pretty easy. We can write to a file. They demonstrate here that they're going to write out multiple lines. Typically what we might do though is we'll have something stored as a list or a dictionary perhaps, and we're going to loop through and write stuff to it. So let's kind of come back here and we're going to do this. We're going to open our file. I'm going to go for value in lines, print value, and I'm going to reuse this code up here from above. So we're going to read in to the lines those values, and so I'm going to print the value in that list, and then just to show you, we can also then print out the average AVG. So let's go ahead and run this code. So now I'm going to print the values that are in my list from above and the average, so cross your fingers. Oops, I used the wrong thing. I need to do f.write. Hopefully you caught that as I was doing that. So this is looping through the lines in memory. Once I'm finished with that, I'll print out the average to the file. So, okay, so I gotta have a string. So this needs to be str, run it. Didn't get an error message, so myfile2.txt. There it is. Those are those numbers. There is that average. Okay, so we can print what we want to a file. Again, if I'm going to loop through some kind of data structure, here's that code. And then if I'm going to print something independently, there's that code right there. Oh, by the way, they do provide some different ways of opening that file. So we've already seen the W that lets us rewrite and it overwrites whatever's in there. If I open it with an A, it's going to append. So here, if I put an A, I'm going to run it. And myfile.2.txt, check this out. Now it's appended to the file. We've got the information duplicated. And oh, by the way, look at this. We have a problem here where it didn't put a new line character. So we always want to make sure that we have a blank space at the end of our file. So to fix that, I'm going to come in here, f.write. I should be able to just put a f.write, and I should just put a blank line on the end. So let's run this. Cross your fingers. We should have our stuff in there 3 times. Nope, I do have to put in a blank. So no errors. And so now, and I wonder if, let me clean this up. I wonder if it got there and then it crashed out. Crush fingers. And so now I'm performing what I want, where I'm appending to the file each time. And I don't have a blank line on the end there. Let me run this again. So what? Oh, I need to maybe do this. Let me put a new line character in there. Clean up my file. Always have a blank line. Run it. And there we go. There's that blank line. Crush fingers. Yeah, now I'm doing it just fine. So anytime I'm going to append, I need to make sure that I put that new line character on the end for me, so that way I can append to the file properly. Okay, section 3, real quick. They talk about the OS module. What I want you to understand here is that different operating systems, Windows versus Mac and Linux, represent file paths differently. In Windows, they use the backslash, and in Mac and Linux, they use the /. So Python will let you use some of the OS package tools to create a file path that will work regardless of the file system. So this is just kind of nice to know. Keep it in the back of your mind that when you move forward, if you get into industry and have to work with files, this is a known issue. So you have to make sure you use the proper file paths. Last thing we're going to look at is in section 7.7. They talk about a comma separated value file, or a CSV. The idea of a CSV is it is like a spreadsheet. In fact, you can open it up in a spreadsheet, and it is rows of information where the information are separated by commas. So this might be a student's name and their scores on these 4 homework assignments. Well, Python has a nice CSV module that lets us read in a file as a CSV. It will create a 2-dimensional array that we can loop through, and it will contain each of the rows as a list. And then if you scroll down here, we can actually take those scores. So they've got these as scores, and we can access them as a list position. So scores 0 is the name, scores 1 is that score, scores 2 is that score, score 3, and score 4, and so forth. So very nice tool to read in CSV values. All right, that's it for this recording. I'll talk to you next time.